I used to love going to our local state and county fairs. They were cheaper than going to some of those big amusement parks, and my parents were usually willing to give me and my little sister Grace some money to go to the rides and game tents by ourselves. We were still within their view at all times, though. Can't be too careful. I loved going on all of the rides, whereas Grace preferred the games so she could win prizes. I'd go on the smaller ones for her, like the one that just goes in a circle with small ups and downs, then goes in reverse. We'd also go on the classic carousel and bumper cars. However, that also meant we took the ones I enjoyed too, like the Ferris wheel or the scary one that took you through dark rooms with creepy music, things crawling down the walls, fake screams, things like that. She handled them pretty well, but she would never go on the rocket one. That's the one that shot you straight up and then did the dead drop to the bottom. So I had to wait till closer to when we were leaving and go with my dad or go alone. We'd go to the game booths as we made our way around. Again, she liked the ones where you had to try and spray the rubber ducks in the water. The bigger the number on the bottom, the bigger the prize you got. She also liked the balloon pop where you had to throw darts at them. She threw the darts like a baseball. It was always hilarious to watch and surprised me when they never came back at us. She tried the ring toss or the bottle one, where you had to knock them over with a ball, but her aim wasn't the best, so I always tried those for her and let her pick out the prizes. There was this other one that we both enjoyed where you had to break open fake rocks and you got to keep whatever was inside. We liked those because they had anything from candy, small toys, and even tickets to other games and rides in them. This particular time, we were having some great luck. Just about every rock we broke had candy in it. So we went on the Ferris wheel and ended up eating way too much of our spoils. Grace started feeling the effects of it all between the candy, the sugar rush, and running around everywhere in the Florida heat. She started to crash and felt ill, and because she was only about 6 or so at the time, that meant that all she knew to do was to be grumpy about it. This would mean that we would end up going home fairly soon. But I hadn't been able to go on the rocket yet, so I was upset that I wouldn't get to go. To my surprise, my parents decided that maybe we just needed to eat some real food and drink more water and play it from there. I was hopeful that she would perk up or that my parents would at least agree to let me go on a few more rides before leaving. So we made our way to one of the big tents to eat. They had a big sign with a hot dog on it with some movie parody name about frying. I don't remember what it was, but my dad always made some joke about it. Anyways, they sold the stuff you would normally see at a fair. Hot dogs, hamburgers, corn dogs, nachos, onion rings, fries, things like that. So not the healthiest, but at least it was better than just candy. The guy running the stand looked a little off though. Since I was a kid, he just looked like someone who was tired. He had longer hair pulled back into a ponytail and then covered with a hairnet. He looked like he was swimming in his clothes though, as he was super thin and his clothes looked to be 2 or 3 sizes too big. I remember seeing him try to hold his pants up even though he had a belt on. I also remember thinking he was sick because he kept rubbing or wiping his nose on his shoulder or arm and sniffling a lot. My parents were talking to Grace and asking her what she wanted. She kept fighting them about not wanting to eat and wanting to go to like McDonald's instead. My dad tried to convince her that they had chicken strips, which were similar to nuggets, so she finally agreed to get those. We all decided on what we wanted and we placed our order. The guy was staring at my dad all wide-eyed and was always responding like, "Yeah, man, sure, yeah, no problem, man," all while nodding constantly. My dad paid in cash, and then we went to sit at the bench nearby. Once we got over there, my mom was talking about just going home since it was already getting late, and I started begging them to let me go on the rocket before we left. They were hesitant at first, but said they would see how Grace felt after we ate. I knew what that meant, and that meant I wasn't going to be able to go. My mom asked me to grab some ketchup from at the stall, and I walked away dragging my feet, visibly mad. I walked back up to the tent and started filling the little condiment cups and was watching the guy make the food. I remember him catching my eye because while he looked off, the way he was working was impressive, at least. I watched as he poured fries across the 2 fryers and simultaneously flipping their burger patties. Being a kid, I thought it was pretty smooth, almost like a juggler. That was about when he noticed me watching him. So he then took the spatula, tossed it in the air, then spun around and caught it. That's when he posed facing towards me with his arms out like a ta-da moment. He looked like he was enjoying himself, and with his oversized clothes, it made me chuckle. He walked over by me and asked for my name, and I told him. He asked if I had been having fun. I said yeah, but then mentioned that we were going to have to leave after eating because my sister was sick. He said he was sorry to hear that, but said the fair was going to be open for a while, so maybe we could end up coming back. I was just being dramatic and said something about probably not because we only ever go once a year. Which wasn't a lie, we rarely went multiple times in the same year, unless we went with other people. We both got quiet, so he walked over to the fryer, pulled the fries out and neatly poured them into a basket. He sat there and stared at it for a few seconds, then walked back over and leaned in close and said, "Hey, I know what will cheer you up. Want to see a cool trick?" So I said sure. I would never, in a million years, expect what this dude would end up doing. He pulled the baskets out of the fryer and set them on the counter next to him. He then pulled on the bottom of the glove he was wearing, looked over at me with these wide eyes wiggling his fingers and said, "Now you see my fingers?" Curiously, I said, "Yeah." Then this crazy ass shoves his hand in the hot grease and immediately starts screaming. Then I started screaming. Now there are 2 people screaming, and I immediately covered my eyes and kept screaming. Very quickly, I hear and feel my family run up there to me, and my mom grabs me and has me open my eyes. I think she was checking to see if there was any grease on my face. However, I was still within sight of this crazy guy, and I looked over to see him pull his hand out, or at least what's left of it, and he screams, "Now you don't!" and is going back and forth between laughing and screaming from the pain. The smell was horrendous. Grace had burned some of her hair before when she got too close to a candle, and that smelled awful, but this was worse by tenfold. The smell of flesh almost made me sick, but seeing what was left of his hand, the skin falling off, that did make me sick. So between this, of course, other people are now running over to see what's going on. My mom was trying to shield our eyes while my dad was calling for help. My mom ended up walking us away while my dad talked to security, the managers, and the paramedics. What's worse is that they even asked me what had happened in case I was injured, so I had to go through it all again. We definitely left at that point, and I had no arguments with it. But I did have trouble sleeping for a few nights. I don't know what happened to the guy, never heard anything about him after that, but being older and seeing other people with similar behavior, it was obvious the guy was on something. I can only hope it at least dulled some of the pain because I cannot imagine what that would have felt like. But since then, I have not gone to another fair. I just can't. and seeing a fryer similar to that one always makes my stomach churn. So, creepy guy from the fair, thanks for years of childhood trauma, and let's continue to never meet again. A while back, when I hit 19, I kind of ended up in a situation where I wanted to get out of the house and get my own place, mostly because I was tired of living with my parents. It was more that I was tired of living by others' rules. I love my parents dearly, I really do, but they were also pretty strict with things, and it was definitely holding back my social life. I'm kind of a free spirit, and I like to be out socializing, and they wanted me home by 8 p.m. every night. That's not me complaining, their house, their rules and all, but it was enough to make me realize that I could just move out and get a cheap place nearby, keep them close, and make sure that I had my freedom. So that's what I decided I was going to do. After looking around for a while, I actually found a decent apartment that I could afford with my job that was less than 10 minutes away from where my parents lived. I went through all the motions to get the apartment, paid the deposit, and got it. Moving day came, my parents helped me get everything in and set up, and it was at that point that I realized I didn't have a whole lot, and definitely didn't have enough to fill an apartment. My bedroom had my bed, my desk, dresser, and my living room had a table with a TV on it, and that was pretty much it. I started talking to my dad about it and trying to figure out a list of things that I needed for the apartment or what I could use, and my dad made a suggestion. I should check for cheap furniture on Craigslist. We talked about it a bit, and he actually mentioned that if I found some stuff for the apartment on Craigslist that would work for me and wasn't terribly expensive, he would go in on half and would go with me to get it all. I thought this was a good idea. He had a truck, plus having him with me would make me feel a whole lot safer in dealing with strangers. I agreed and told him that I would look online and get a hold of a few people over the next couple of weeks, and we would meet up when I had everything ready to go. I did just that. I got on Craigslist and went through a number of postings and sent a few emails. Some responses I got were obviously scams or bots, so I ignored those. I had a few people that were interested in selling to me at first, but ended up disregarding me after I told them that it was going to be almost 2 weeks before I could pick it up. Apparently, they weren't willing to wait to sell it, which is fine. After sifting and sending, I was actually able to get a few people that were willing to hold onto their items for me, so at least it wasn't a waste of time. Then I found a post that was more or less furniture, men's clothing, electronics, and more. I want it all gone, $200. I clicked through the pictures that this person had posted, and looking through it, they were selling a lot of things for such a low price. There were a number of furniture items, a couple of game consoles, a decent desktop computer, and then clicking through it, I noticed that the clothes were mostly my size. I was over the moon, thinking I had hit a jackpot. Sure, it seemed a bit sketchy, but at the same time, if this was legit, I would have furnished my whole place and had a bunch of what would basically be luxury items for $200. The post had a phone number on it, so I immediately grabbed my cell and called the person. I mentioned the post and I asked the woman that had answered why she was selling things for so cheap, because it did seem a bit odd. She then said that she and her boyfriend had split up and that she hadn't seen him for a few weeks at this point, and all the items she wanted gone were his. She even sent a few pictures of herself in front of all the items while we were talking to prove it was all real. I told her that I would give her the asking price for it if she could hold it for 2 days, as it was the Thursday before we were supposed to go get the items, and that I would take every single item off her hand that she wanted to sell. She actually agreed. She mentioned I was the first person to call and said that she would go ahead and mark it as sold. I obviously was over the moon. I had just struck Craigslist gold. I called my dad and told him that this lady had a bunch of items that she wanted to get rid of for $200, and he seemed a bit concerned at first. I explained the situation, mentioned that she had sent me proof that it was real, and then told him that it was left over from a bad breakup and that the boyfriend hadn't come back for it. It took a bit of extra convincing, but I was able to finally get him to go with it. Saturday morning comes, and I text the woman mentioning that we would be there within the hour. She responded with an okay, and that was it. Not the best response, but it was enough for me. We headed to the house, and I was feeling even better about this transaction. The house was nice, like multi-story and well taken care of, so she could afford to just get rid of these things for under retail value, kind of nice. We pull into the driveway and walk up to the door, and I ring the doorbell. Nothing, no response. We waited for a little while, but after a couple of minutes with no response, I rang the doorbell again. Still no answer. I pulled up the initial messages between the two of us to make absolutely sure that this was the address, and it definitely was. I then decided to go ahead and give her a call. When I did, I could hear the phone ringing inside the house, like just on the other side of the door. I actually glanced over toward the window by the door and started looking inside. My dad chastised me at first, saying that I was being rude, but I had this really weird feeling that something was off. This was a nice house. The woman I spoke with was friendly and seemed like she really was wanting to get rid of these items, and I was really wanting to get the stuff she was selling. Then I realized why I was feeling off about the whole thing, and what I was actually seeing. There was someone lying on the floor just inside the door. I mentioned it to my dad, saying that I think something had happened to the lady. He came over and looked in, and then told me to call 911, and I could tell by his tone that he realized something was definitely wrong. I called them, and I explained the situation to the person on the other end. It was a bit weird having to tell them that we had no idea who this person was, just that we were here to buy stuff, and then tell her that there was a person unconscious on the floor inside the house. It was just as awkward trying to explain it to the first cop that pulled up to the house as well, but I think they understood it better than the dispatcher. Sure enough, the officer agreed that there was a person unconscious in the house and decided that that was cause enough to kick the door in and call medics. They obviously kept us out in the driveway, and we had to answer a lot of questions about why we were here and how we were connected to what was now a crime scene. After the medics showed up, the potential crime scene became a confirmed crime scene, and it became pretty clear how serious this really was. The long short of it, the woman was deceased, and based on how the officer explained it, it was an obvious homicide. Thankfully, I had all the text messages and screenshots of the post to help and show that we weren't who killed her, but I was also able to explain to them that she had told me about her ex and how they had split up. They ended up taking my information and telling me that they would be in touch with me if they had more questions, and we had to leave at that point. They never called me back or asked me to come in at all. I don't know if they ever ended up solving the case, but it definitely seems like this was a situation where the ex-boyfriend came back and did the unthinkable. What makes it worse, part of me still thinks that he may have done it because she was selling his stuff, and that if I hadn't set up the meeting to pick it all up, He may not have done it, but if it weren't me, then someone else would have jumped on the deal. I don't let it tear me up, but it does bother me a little. I did end up getting a couch from my living room from another seller and a few other things, but that was the only time I have ever used Craigslist. I know it's not a common thing to happen, but I didn't want to ever be put in a situation like that again. A few years ago, my husband had to go out of state for a business trip for about a week. We had twins that were about 18 months at the time, and they were our first kids, so it took a lot out of both of us. Previously, I would just go with him on his trips, but it becomes a lot harder with children, so we agreed it was best I stayed home. For work, I actually helped a friend with her small business of house cleaning, so I worked when I wanted, which made it easier for me to be able to stay home with my boys. However, I also get anxious about being home alone. I lived in some very bad places as a kid, so I constantly feared that someone would break in while I was alone and something would happen to me. That unfortunately followed me as I got older, and now I don't like being alone for more than a night. While he was gone though, my mom invited me over to her place for the week, so that way she could help me with my boys and spend time with them, and I would have someone to talk to. The only thing was that she lived about 4 hours away, so I would be making a mini road trip with my 2 boys and my little dog. That first night alone was not pleasant. I put our air mattress in our boys' room, so I wasn't alone and slept there. Those things are not comfortable for more than a few hours. With little sleep that day, I went about our daily routine of making breakfast, went to their doctor's appointments, picked up some groceries and a prescription, and went to see a friend as to have less time alone. I will mention that the part about going to my mom's was very last minute and not planned out. Later that evening, when we got back home, I was making something for dinner when my mom had called. As we were talking and I was telling her my concerns, she offered to have me come stay the rest of the week. I had plans to go out there first thing tomorrow morning, but I figured it wasn't too late, being around 6 or so, and after eating, I called my mom to let her know I would head out there tonight. The anxiety in me thought 4 hours alone tonight was much better than 6 more whole days, so off to packing I went. I got a few outfits for myself and the kids, since I would be able to do laundry, got the car all packed up with our stuff, then the dog, then the twins. The one thing I failed to realize was that while it was only 6 when I started, we ended up not leaving till a little after 7. I also did not sleep too well that night, so I knew I was going to need more caffeine. After picking up some coffee, we were on the road. We were probably about 2 hours in, or close to it, when I had to stop to use the restroom and grab something to snack on to keep me awake. I remember coming up to this gas station that had a small bar and grill attached to it, so I felt comfortable knowing there were going to be people around. I let the dog out first while I stood next to the car. Then after putting the dog back in, I pulled the boys out, locked the door, and headed inside. There were a few rowdy people on the other side, most likely drinking, so it was pretty loud. Random laughing, yelling, and clapping echoed into the little gas station. After I checked out, I started getting the boys buckled in. I find it easier to carry one in a sling while carrying the other in the car seat. That way I have at least one hand free. So I sit Evan down on the seat while I put Ian back in his. I have a little hatchback, so again I find it easier to walk around on the other side rather than reaching over them. As I went over to buckle Ian in, I heard the music from the bar get louder as someone opened the door. Out came 2 people, a man and a woman arguing very loudly. I can't remember what about, but they were loud enough to make me look over. I continue buckling him in and then go around to the other side to get Evan strapped back in. From there, I hear them yelling again and look back over to see her punching him in the chest. I just finished getting them secured and did a fast walk over to the driver's door and got in. Before I continued, I decided to text my mom and husband to let them know how much longer I had. While doing this, I started hearing more yelling, but this time it was things like, "Let go of me." Thinking it was the same couple, I looked up to see they were not within my view. I chalked it up to them moving away and that it was none of my business, and started to set my phone back up with the GPS so I could head out. As I start to pull out of the parking lot, I am startled by my passenger door opening as a woman is screaming help and jumping in my car. She quickly locks the door and starts screaming at me, "Go!" and crying. I didn't know what to do at first and screamed something back that I probably shouldn't have, but then took off. The gas station was right off the highway, so it didn't take long to get back on. I didn't know what to do, so I just drove while this woman I didn't know sobbed in the seat next to me and screamed every once in a while. My boys are wide awake at this point, also on the verge of tears, so I tried comforting them the best I could. I don't think this woman realized I had kids in the car by the way she looked back at them. She apologized and explained that this guy she had just met was trying to force her into his truck, and that was her screaming "let go," not the couple I saw earlier. She said I could drop her off at the next exit and she would find someone from there. As I got over to the exit, there was a black and yellow truck sitting at the intersection with their lights off. Unfortunately, I didn't know who this person was or what they were doing until the girl started screaming, "It's him!" Not knowing what else to do, I blew the yellow light and went straight back onto the highway. I know it was stupid, but I thought at the least if a cop saw it and stopped us, he would keep going. This guy quickly did a burnout to follow us as well. Noticing he was behind us, the girl starts screaming and crying more, now making my kids cry. I was more terrified at that moment than I was being home alone, and now I regretted leaving. Not knowing what to do and on the verge of tears myself, I tried telling the girl to calm down as she was upsetting the kids when I saw this guy get right on my ass and flash his lights. I was now in tears, thinking this is how my life was going to end when we started coming up to an accident. There were lights everywhere. The far left lane was blocked, and I knew this was our chance. I quickly shot over the other two lanes, honking and holding down my horn, and swerved over to the shoulder. I have never seen a cop run to a car faster. We're all inconsolable and trying to explain what happened when the cop had us get out of the car. Once a little calmer, we explained that the truck was following us and tried kidnapping her. He got as much info as possible and put in a bolo for it. After getting more information, the cop offered to take the girl home and to follow me for a bit to see if the truck showed up again. I called my mom and husband first to calm me, the boys and the dog down a bit, and agreed to have the cop follow me for a few miles as a peace of mind. That woman hugged me so hard and thanked me for not shoving her out of the car, and also apologized for putting us in danger. I know it was terrifying, but I was also glad I was there for her because who knows what could have happened. We drove a few miles with no issues, so the cop had me pull over again and let me know I would be on my own again. At this point, I was wide awake and just ready to get to my mom's to crash. The last hour to hour and a half seemed to fly by, and after arriving, I was quickly out. I hope they ended up finding that guy because that could have ended a lot worse, and I'm thankful the police were there when they were at the time to save us from something much worse. Unfortunately, Now I have a slight fear of driving at night. So that, my friends, was another scary story collection. That's interesting. It's right about the time for the fair season, at least over here by us. It's usually in September, I think. And thought it's like, it wouldn't be bad to go to one. Haven't been to one in years. And then I hear the one from this story, and I'm like, you know what? I can make a hot dog at home. It's fine. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts, or let me know, do you enjoy fairs or any other type of local festival? And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week, and until next time, take care.